Hey, Face Loop, Gabriel, aka Fortuna here once again, and we're just doing this video on Ableton's 10.1 Wavetable synthesizer once again. This time we're going to look a little bit deeper at the user samples that you can import into this thing and seeing what kind of things you can make out of some samples that you might not expect to be quite musical, and some of them that would be musical and then end up kind of like garbage. So anyway, I'll show you what I mean. If you want to follow along and you don't have Ableton's 10.1 beta just yet, just make sure you sign up at ableton.centercode.com. I'll put the link below, and you can just make an account. If you are a suite owner, you should be able to download this right away or within a very reasonable short period of time where they approve your account. So without further ado, let's just get right into Ableton. It's going to be a lot of fun. Let's go. Alright, so as you can see, I've been making some discoveries with this thing. We're looking at Wavetable's synthesizer here in Ableton 10.1, and I just want to talk about some things that are a little bit fun that you could try if you have the beta or if you're looking to get the update, which you will get for free if you have the suite version of Ableton 10. Now, yeah, I've just been tossing all kinds of things at this Wavetable synthesizer today to see what kind of results I'm getting in terms of, the quality, any glitches, what are the opportunities with it, what kind of sounds are unique to this. Now, I have this set up in a way so that my envelope number 3 is actually looping, and it's just going, it's just modulating the oscillator position of oscillator 1 from 0 to 100%. That way we get kind of a full spectrum view of this, of what's going on. Now, I want to show you some interesting things. So let's start looking at some samples. So I put together a little folder of variations of sounds. You might check out this thing. So of course, Wavetable is really popular for bass. So let's first of all put this in regular unison mode so there's no funny business going on. And we're going to throw this bass sample. And all you have to do is just click and drag, boom. From your browser, you can do this outside your browser as well, from your Finder or Windows Explorer. And if we just even disable the envelope right away, you can see that if you put in a sample that has a lot of energy and power, it's already going to be crazy. And it's going to work. So what we can do is we can now swipe through some of these things with our envelope. So if I just enable my envelope 3 and apply that to oscillator position 1, let's see what that sounds like. If we speed up the envelope here with the attack. So if you're looking to make some nasty bass, add a sub under there. Add your classic maybe shimmer unison mode. Then you can start modulating as well. That's really awesome. Now, where I'm interested in looking at the sound design today is kind of sounds that are a little bit more unexpected. So, for example, a kick drum. I don't believe we have any really, percussive proper kick drum samples in our regular user library, but here we have a kick drum sound that I picked up from Synthesizer a long time ago. If we hit an E on the keyboard, wow. Now, just remember, this is with the unison mode on, so I'm going to turn off unison mode. Really, really nice. So, what else can we do here? Maybe changing the speed of this oscillator. Pretty nice. If you're looking to make kind of, strange, otherworldly kick drums or percussion with Wavetable, you could, use this as a layer on top of your regular drums and add a little bit of, a texture that's a little bit different. Really like that. I love that I literally just dropped a sample from our browser here into Wavetable with this envelope selection, and there's nothing else going on, and it's already sounding awesome. Now, what if we started to add some modulation as it's being swept through here? So let's add random modulation, have LFO1 set to a random kind of a sample and hold type of waveform, amount to 100%, a little bit fast, and now let's apply it over to oscillator 1 position. So let's see. Really fun stuff. Now, I've been focusing a lot on the bass end here, but if we just raise it up a little bit on the keyboard, you can also start to get some really interesting tones. And yeah, I'm really enjoying this. Using this almost like a keyboard as well. Maybe we'll turn off the LFO here. Let's see. Add a lot of release. Add a lot of release here as well. Strange, eh? So I love it. It's kind of you can think of all these higher harmonic contents at the beginning of your sample as kind of like you know, at the opening of the filter, or you know, adding higher harmonics to your fundamental pitch. Now, of course, we're listening to this kick drum as this smooth sample version inside Wavetable. Now, there is a button to enable the raw kind of reading of the waveform, but you can see that like, especially along the edges here, you have a nice smoothing and nice even spread out like connection points between all the waveforms. As I swipe through it, it's nicely and evenly connected. But if I hit raw, you notice a lot of that kind of gets broken, and it all of a sudden becomes very, very wiggly and very not stable, to say the least. So if I play our sample back here in this raw mode, you can especially hear in the middle of the sample that there are a lot of artifacts, a lot of glitches. Now, of course, we can't really fault Wavetable for this because we threw some garbage sample into it, but the way that it's splicing and cutting up your sample is just, yeah, a little bit more smooth when you have a raw disabled there. Sweet. So lots of fun stuff to be had there. I'm just going to try some different modes here. For example, right now I've been trying a lot of just playing the sample essentially like from start to beginning, but we can do the opposite as well. We can try to play it backwards. Let's apply envelope 3, negative this way, and start here. So you can make some interesting sounds like that. You could even try something more like back and forth. So if we do, you could even do this with an LFO. I think that would be a little bit easier and more straightforward. So let's try LFO 2, up and down, and let's just try a nice triangle for that. We'll put our position at 50. You can see it's actually really, really rich as it's going through all the wavetable positions. So that's really awesome. One thing I should mention that, you know, of course, unlike Serum, you can't really select manually like all the different slices of the sample. But there are some tricks that kind of essentially limiting the range so that you're only playing through the selection that you want. So for example, if I'm looking to play through a waveform from the beginning to the middle, you know, you can just kind of map it out. So let's say you start at 0 and you have an envelope rising from 0 to 100% there. It could be looping or not looping. Let's say it's not looping. And then I want to set the amount here in the matrix. So I have envelope 3 to oscillator 1. Let's open that up to, let's say, 25%. So I can, you know, kind of designate exactly where I want the sample to start and end at those points. And then you can add a little bit of modulation. Let's say with LFO1, let's add a value of 5 here just to give it a little bit of motion. You could even add a little less motion. Remember, sometimes subtle is good, so. Super, super cool. I really dig this. I think this could be making for a really great layer for your bass. Once you start getting into, you know, adding your second oscillator, you add your sub, you start, you know, playing with that kind of material, and then, you know, doubling the voices with your unison. Holy cow. Now, of course, this is very bass-centric sound design, so let's get into a little bit of something else. So I do want to make a bass sound today, and I'll come back to that one. So this is going to be, let's say, like a deep modulated bass, but I want to explore some other sounds first. So let's duplicate that for now. I'm going to call that bass. I do want to come back to it and make a sound in there, and then we'll make this. I do want to try a pad, and maybe I'll try a lead with that. Now let's go here onto this lead section and check out some other sounds. So we went through the kick drum. I have some other percussion we can take a look at. So let's go up on the keyboard here and turn down the volume. We'll turn down a lot of things here. Don't want to go deaf. So I have the kick drum. I also have a hi-hat here. Let's drop that in. Surprisingly bassy because I have a sub bass on. There we go. So once you have just the isolated wavetable there of the hi-hat, you can tell it's quite, yeah, it's quite fizzly. But, you know, if you get high enough, kind of has a nice stringy sound to it, actually. So if we make the envelope maybe a little bit more like this, and maybe long release, has a nice, yeah, it has a nice keyboard quality to it. So if we take our hi-hat, can make some nice, you know, high frequency textural stuff up there, and maybe let's modulate it all the way through. And now let's try to play through the sample at the original rate. So this is going at da da, so kind of short. So let's speed this up a little bit. Yeah, something like that. When you are playing back your samples at the same rate, it's almost like using the sampler, and somehow it just becomes a little bit more pitched because of the smoothing. If we play the original sample like this with the raw enabled, check it out. Let's go a little bit lower. So you can think of this as playing through the sample in real time in a way, right? That's kind of interesting. Like, I'm wondering if you can use this synthesizer as a granular synthesizer in a way. Like if you start, you know, if you end up using longer textural material, or maybe let's even slow it down and, you know, swipe through this wavetable a lot slower. See, and then start varying the positioning of the sample. So perhaps we do something with the LFO where it varies by, let's say, 2.5. I know it's a really small amount, but you can think of this as like the spray. I know a lot of these granular samplers have spray amount, and you can think of this as being like a random spray. So yeah, let's keep that around, let's say 5. Right? So you can think of this as almost like it's like a granular sampler playback type of thing. Now, let's try some other sounds that are a little bit more interesting. So we got the hi-hat. What is this here? It's kind of laser sound. Let's try that later. I'm going to try some more drums. So I have a nice deep kick, one of my favorite samples. And let's play it back. Remember, this is raw. And let me just disable this LFO thing, and we'll play back almost at the same speed. And some samples, it seems like it's a little bit harder to get, you know, the kind of original playback. But let's go not raw. And now you see it starts to get a lot more musical, right? So I definitely do really appreciate the smoothing. I think the smoothing that Wavetable does to these samples is quite great. Like, honestly, here, check this out. Like, if we just take, I'm just gonna grab a mixing channel strip here, and let's add some compression and drive. And let's just quickly add a bunch of reverb. Let's also make sure that reverb is sidechained. So right away, like, there's not a lot happening here, but, you know, with just a couple elements, it's already so big and fat. Sick. I'm really, really digging this. So let's get rid of all these effects once again. Boom. Don't need that. All right. Lead. Okay. So actually, I do want to disable that real quick. All right. So going back to our sounds, that's drums still making bass sounds. What am I doing? Let's go back to our sample pool. So this is kind of a snare type of tom. Let's turn off that sub. So again, really turning off that raw really helps. And I'm really, like, I find that there's going to be a lot of potential here for using percussion, like especially things with a lot of like high harmonic content and, you know, strong transients at the beginning of the sound to add, you know, nice plucks and nice articulation to your sound, or just perhaps, you know, use it as a pivot point of your high frequency content and your not so high frequency content, so that when you're modulating between them, let's do this. So something like this. Lots of good stuff that you can be had there. So let's get on to some other content that we can use for this. Let's try some vocals. And yeah, I think that vocal sample we just heard. Yeah. Let's enable our envelope 3. Now this is where it gets really tricky. Let's go back to raw here for a second. So it sounds like that. Let's see where the original pitch is. So somewhere around here. Somewhere around there, but of course it's very, very glitchy with our raw mode enabled. Let's smooth it out. It's still very gritty, so there's some vocal samples or instrument samples that I find for some reason they don't quite work as well for this kind of work, but we can try maybe modulating at different rates. It's funny because once it gets to the very end and it's very bright and harmonic, you get just this nasty bass thing. But you notice that the way that the sampling gets split up here, it doesn't allow you for like the kind of melodic sampling that you might think that you could do for vocals. Like we suddenly lose all of that content. I'm gonna loop this. And it's interesting because I'm hearing essentially two harmonics here. There's the lower pitch, but then there's this higher pitch as well. It's quite, I think this will be difficult to work with, unfortunately. Like here if I play a major, you know, a seventh or a fifth, perfect fifth. It's actually a lot of dissonance there. But, you know, maybe on its own could make an interesting sound effect or lead. Let's try something like this, more experimental. So, of course, maybe layered with a bass could make a cool growl. And then once you get into lead territory, you can actually make quite a nice lead with this. Kind of has like a phase shifting type of quality to it. And now once you start displacing these notes as well, oh my. They all kind of start swiping at different rates. So if I play them all at the same time, but if I displace them, you should be able to hear the, you know, the modulation for each note kind of nicely coming in there. Sweet. So I'm really enjoying that. Surprisingly, the vocal effect with all this crazy stuff going on, it sounds a lot more usable than the clean pitch one, right? So if I play the clean pitch one again, like this, I'm just swapping out the sample. So this is what we had before from the affected vocals, and this is the regular pitch vocal. It makes an interesting texture, but it's not quite full and rich as I would like it to be. So let's see if I have one more. I thought I had one more vocal sample. So let's do that. So you can see again this very clean vocal sample. It's very thin once you start using it as a synth. And it suffers a little bit. It could be the quality of the sample. It could be the vocalist. It could be a number of things. But in this case, we have way too many harmonics happening that I'm not quite a big fan of. So let's make a lead sound with some of this knowledge and see what we can do. Yeah, we'll get to that later. So I'm going to use, let's say we use, actually, let's see here. Let's do that. And we're going to make a lead. So let's add a little bit of glide. And I'm going to start making this a little bit fatter. I think for a lead, this should be all right. Now I'm actually going to layer kind of a similar thing on the same, on the second oscillator, but on this using the same sample. So let's see here. I'm going to displace this. Awesome, something like that. And we're gonna do, let's see, I was thinking to turn this down a little bit. Sweet. So now we can start playing with even further things like pitch, modulation, frequency. But I'm just gonna go ahead and add a little bit of a same combo here, compression and overdrive. And let's turn down the glide a bit. Now, it's something pretty interesting now, but let's add kind of a background layer here with this wavetable. So again, let's duplicate this, and I'm gonna try something a bit different, something a bit more noisy, I think. So I just duplicated that wavetable on the second wavetable. So this is main. This is gonna be our background layer, and then we're gonna choose the same waveform, but I'm gonna do something really noisy with it and start looking at some of these effects. Now, these effects get, I find they're actually quite useful for the Ableton stock samples that they came with, but with your user content, it gets really wild really fast, especially once you start getting into resampling and putting, samples right back in, resampling like that. So, I'm gonna use, for this second background layer, let's make sure I didn't break that. Yes, okay. So background layer, let's try FM, and let's try maybe the kind of random LFO here. So I'm liking that, but I need it to be noisier. Something like that, perhaps. And I think all I need to add now is perhaps a little bit of a verb. Let's see. And I'm just gonna keep going a little bit further, and I'm gonna modulate the pitch as well of the main one. And let's turn the volume of that down. And we're going to take the second envelope and just modulate the pitch a bit more. So a little trick, if you're not too sure about this technique, I'm just using a very, very sharp attack, short decay, no sustain, no release really, for our pitch. To give it a little bit more of a percussive element, we can add maybe a final LFO here on, let's say, like this, and just modulate the pitch with the mod wheel. You could do it that way. Let's just add it here. Oh, that's the amp. Let's do pitch. There we go. If we add a little bit of key tracking to the frequency of the filter. And let me just throw in a MIDI effect here just so we can hear it a little bit more animated. So. Really wild, like if you listen to the background of that, holy cow. So yeah, really cool stuff. Wow, I mean, you gotta remember we went from just this, like that's like well, it's laser sound effect, right? So nice, but now, you can make a really kind of glitchy, modern, wide, big lead pretty much out of anything, it seems. So let's go. I'm just gonna switch modes here. So let's close our wavetable. Let's go to our pads, and I'm gonna check out some final things here. So going back to simpler times, right? We're gonna check out some other sounds. So I have some instrument samples that I kind of want to check out. So if I drop our trombone here, let's check out our original sample. It's actually quite long, and it goes into different parts or segments of the sampling process, but you can see that it kind of gets cut off here at some point. So let's take a listen, slow it down as slow as possible. I'm just making sure that LFO is off, and we're gonna go 100% through this wavetable. So you can tell that using these long, sustained, rich sample like sets, they do actually seem quite effective. Let me just have the sub off now. If I play the raw version, kind of similar, but less, there's less volume. There's definitely a lot less, well, there's more artifacting, that's for sure. So what about if we try something more like the grand piano? Now, I'm really digging that. What's the original length? It's actually quite long, so let's And this is the pitch that we had the sample at. Now that's kind of cool. You can make a keyboard out of this really easily. Now, so you can make a keyboard with this. That's cool. And of course, yeah, we can just swipe through like in the other modes like I showed you. I'm trying to make a pad sound, and I have an idea of what I might use, but I want to show you a couple more tricks before we get on going. So we have our instrument samples. Now, going back to some of our drums, what if we start using some drums that have rhythm? If we play it low enough and at the right speed, you should be almost able to hear the original break now. If we go into raw mode, now this is really cool because now you're using, you know, the drums as like almost like a vocoder source. So let's try and use this a little bit more effectively. So what if we start, maybe let's try a different sample here. Right, so I believe this is a sample I had in the opening of this here. Now, when you start displacing these notes, so you can think of this as, if you set this right, you can time it, you can, you know, almost tempo sync it to your track and use other sources to give rhythm to your instruments. And again, displacing them does wonders sometimes. I think that's actually really, really cool. I'm just gonna turn off the unison here. I don't know, that's wild. So we can make a pad with that actually. Something you can do is maybe take a selection of this sample. So let's go through that. And we're gonna have to speed up the attack. So there you can see I've just isolated that to that note. To those, yeah, those notes in that little loop. And you can kind of make a perfect loop out of that, which is pretty cool. So I would sample that and see what else you could do. Like in the intro, all I did was duplicate this and then take the second one at an octave higher. So I'm very, very, very interested in this. You could try to do things like using chords. What happens when we bring in chords into the situation? Let's try actually this one first. This has two problems that I'm curious about. So let's start with this one first. It's a nice G sharp minor 7th chord on the guitar. You can tell that the harmonics of this actually have that same number of notes here. Very, very interesting. Now, I think in this case, gosh, it's a little bit tricky, but I think you can use this. Gives it a nice wavering effect. So yeah, really cool. I'm actually quite surprised that the chord quality didn't affect the pitch that we're trying to use, because I know that if we go into raw mode, like what is that? It's very bad. But somehow when it's all smoothed out. Now Ableton, I have no idea what kind of technology you're using to do this, but you're turning a chord and making it usable in a sample form for pitch, like kind of repitching and, you know, reharmonization. So that's really sick. Honestly, right away, something that I can think of doing with this would be to invert the playback. So let's change the oscillator position. And let's just make sure that all this stuff is quite short. So like that. Let's make this nice and wide with our shimmer unison. We're going to also add a bit of the reverbs, which is here. And now let's do something like this. That is really nice. I can't I can't say that enough, but that's it's quite nice. It's kind of actually one of my favorite things to do with a lot of this work is to make very textural pads. You feel that, you know, that reversed, you know, almost time ticking type of effect. That's really nice. Now, I want to try this E-piano though, because there's a problem that, well, it's not a problem, but if you're noticing the sample, if you're wearing headphones, there is a panning happening back and forth. And I'm curious, what's going to happen when I feed it through this? Because I know this is a mono synth, so let's, first of all, let's reset that. Let's make it in the positive direction. Let's test the timing. Okay, so something like this. Ah, it's too bad. Oh, right. So very interesting. So one of the things I was very curious about is panning. Now, if you start using samples that have panning or different stereo information, you're not getting anything from importing them, I guess. It does seem to collapse everything into mono and just, you know, play it back in mono as well. But what is interesting, though, is that this sounds still like an E-piano. That's very cool, because the original sample is an E-piano. This sample, you know, if you, again, maybe just, if we just find the right chord. Something approximately like that, but yeah, the quality changes quite a bit. I'm still really surprised that the chordal quality, like the harmony, is completely gone in this, but we get a nice pitch. So very, very cool, Ableton. Lastly, I guess we should actually try and make our pad that we're looking to make. So let's take, I want to make like an angelic pad if possible, but I'm not sure what kind of samples we're going to use because a lot of these vocal samples are not quite successful as I would like them to be. So let's try and take this one. Very, very tough. Let's do backup plan. Bright lights and shapes define. Let's try that. All right, so it looks like I've discovered something which is kind of interesting. So for example, with vocals, and it's something I've been really trying to do with Ableton, I would love to make some kind of vocal choir pads that are not quite realistic, but synthetic, somewhere in between, but, you know, nice and expressive, and it's hard to achieve. I think the closest I've come to doing that is with sampler. So anyway, here we have a sample with different pitches in the vocal line. And what's really interesting is that even though for example, chord qualities are completely gone when you feed them through this, the pitch of different different pitches in your vocal line do come through. So, which makes it really atonal once you start stacking harmonies. However, I'm getting closer to some success. So let's find it right here. Like right there, you can actually make a nice harmony. So we're getting places. Now, let me just add this quarter here so I can start stacking some harmonies. So I'm going to limit this range just once more here. Whoa, that sounds scary. Let's do it here. Let's do shimmer. And now Ableton, so this is a cool feature that would be nice to have, and that is to actually kind of duplicate your current settings completely to your second oscillator. That would be kind of beneficial down the long run. It would be nice to have anyway, but I'm just going to duplicate this a little bit. I'm going to find another spot in my second oscillator here and see if I can do a panning left and right afterwards and see if we can get some cool stereo effect here. You can really hear the pitch variation down here. So I think around there we'll use our envelope. Oops, not on that. We're gonna use it on here. Awesome. I'm really digging this. It's almost starting to sound like a choir, so I'm just going to add a effects mixing channel strip, sick, and check out the low cut a little bit here. See, there's actually a lot of content down there that I want to get rid of. Do 2.5 here. Whoa. Let's do it again. So, really sick. Ableton, new Wavetable synthesis really provides you a lot of opportunities for bass and sound design. Sorry, I said bass, but for sound design in general. So whether you're taking kicks and turning them into bass, or making fast, crazy leads, or you're making really nice ambient choral type of pads. Now, this is one of my favorite presets that I've been making today, so I'm going to save this one. And any other Wavetable type of stuff that I can share that was created with my own recorded samples, I'll definitely be more than happy to share with you. So, hopefully you were able to take some things away from this. Just keep in mind, you know, we didn't even talk a lot about different effects and modulation you can add further with the FM or the classic modulation, the modern modulation, to each wavetable as well. So we're just really strictly talking about modulating through the wavetable, you know, adding some modulation with envelopes and LFOs, but I think you still have quite a bit of more opportunities to try things out, and yeah, hopefully you learned a couple things that you maybe didn't know you could do. All right, so honestly, I was kind of surprised, especially near the end. You saw my reactions were a little bit, yeah, just I was speechless because I didn't expect the kind of qualities I would be able to get just from samples that I was recording at home with this microphone, right? So you're able to really explore this material that you're recording, that you're sampling, that you're taking from other material, and re-sampling it, rewarping it, reworking it. And yeah, I think this is a lot of fun. I think this is one of the easiest wavetable synthesizers I've ever used, especially the kind of smoothing that you get with any sample that you import. You can just throw anything at this and it'll become musical. So definitely really cool. So what have you been making with Wavetable Synthesizer in the 10.1 update here? I know we're really excited to see more content and seeing more tricks that people are going to come up with, because I think right now it feels like sky's the limit. So it just, you keep pushing. If you have any questions, concerns, or requests, just hit us up at Faceloop over on Instagram, or our website linked here below. And just keep in mind, we just released our preset pack, Faded Trap. It's a free download for all Ableton users. Just check it out over on our website. We'll have the link right below this video, and you can get all our instruments that we've developed for this kind of dark, expressive beat music you can make. So yeah, check it out. It's free. And until next time, we'll see you in the loop.